They did not run away. They did not disappear. They made a decision, cold, deliberate, final, to never speak to their own mother again, to block their father's number, to skip Christmas, skip birthdays, skip funerals. And here is what nobody wants to say out loud. A study from the University of Cambridge found that 27% of Americans are currently estranged from a family member. 1 in 4 people. And the research found something even more disturbing. The people who cut off their families are not the broken ones. They are often the healthiest people in the room. That changes everything you thought you knew about this decision. For decades, psychology treated family estrangement as a symptom of damage, a sign of mental instability, an inability to forgive, a character flaw. Then researchers started actually asking the people who had done it. What they found turned everything upside down. Dr. Carl Pielamer, professor at Cornell University, spent years studying family estrangement across thousands of families. His finding was uncomfortable for a culture that worships family. The majority of people who cut off family members reported significant improvements in mental health, reduced anxiety, reduced depression, better sleep, stronger relationships with the people they chose to keep. Not damage, healing. But here is the question Abadi was asking. What happened inside those familias that made walking away feel like the only survivable option? The answer is darker than most people expect. When most people hear they cut off their family, they imagine abuse, violence, addiction, something obvious, something extreme. But the Cambridge study found something far more disturbing. The majority of estrangements do not involve physical abuse. They involve something with no bruises, no police reports, no visible evidence. They involve what psychologists call chronic emotional invalidation, a family system where one person's feelings are consistently dismissed, minimized, mocked, or simply never acknowledged. Year after year, decade after decade, you are too sensitive. That never happened. Why do you always make everything about you? After everything we have done for you, these sentences do not leave marks on skin. They leave marks in the architecture of a person's mind, on their ability to trust their own reality, on their belief that their feelings are legitimate, on their capacity to form healthy relationships with anyone for the rest of their lives. And the person delivering them often genuinely believes they are a good parent. That is the most chilling part, because what comes next explains why some people have no choice but to leave. Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to end their family. The decision does not happen in a single moment. It happens across thousands of moments, each one small enough to dismiss until the accumulation becomes impossible to carry. Psychologists call this straw that breaks the camel's back effect, but in family estrangement, it is rarely one straw. It is usually a final moment of clarity, a moment where the person sees with absolute devastating certainty that nothing will ever change. For some people, that moment is a family even where the same dynamic plays out for the 100th time, and they realize that they have been waiting for a change that was never going to come. For some, it is the birth of their own child, suddenly holding something they would die to protect and realizing they will not allow that dynamic anywhere near this new life. For some, it is sitting in a therapist's office and finally hearing someone say, "What you experienced was not normal. You were not the problem." And understanding for the first time that leaving is not betrayal, it is survival. But here is what the people have never done, it do not understand. Cutting off your family is not freedom, not immediately. What comes first is grief. A specific kind of grief that has no funeral, no sympathy cards, no casseroles from neighbors. Grief for the family you needed them to be, they never were. Grief for the childhood you deserved and did not receive. Grief for the relationship you kept trying to build with people while kept dismantling it. Psychologists call this ambiguous loss, mourning someone who is still alive. And it is, by clinical measure, one of the most psychologically complex forms of grief that exists. The person who cut off their family does not feel relief, not at first. They feel the holidays, they feel the empty chair. They feel the weddings they did not attend, the funerals they missed, the cousins who stopped calling. They feel the way strangers look when they say, "I am not close with my family," and the conversation goes suddenly, uncomfortably quiet. The social cost alone is staggering. And yet they stay gone. Because the alternative, the research consistently shows, is worse. And what the research reveals about long-term outcomes will completely change how you see this decision. Dr. Pillemer's research followed estranged individuals over years. What he found destroyed the cultural narrative method, cutting off families to regret and emptiness. The majority, not some, the majority reported that estrangement had been the right decision, that their mental health had improved, that their other relationships had deepened, that they had become better partners, better friends, better parents, precisely because they had removed the source of chronic psychological damage from their lives. There is a concept in psychology called the oxygen mask principle. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot love others well if something in your life is systematically destroying your capacity to love. The person who walked away from their family was not selfish. They were doing the most difficult, most misunderstood, most quietly courageous thing a human being can do. Choosing their own survival over the comfort of people who were never comfortable to be around. Here is the truth nobody says. Family is not defined by blood. It is defined by how people make you feel when you are in the room with them. If that room has been slowly taking something from you, year after year, holiday after holiday, conversation after conversation, then leaving, it is not abandonment. It is the first decisione you made entirely for yourself. And that, for someone who was never allowed to make those, is not a tragedy. It is a beginning. If this video gave words to something you have been carrying, subscribe to Psychora, because understanding yourself is always worth it. Even when, especially when it is this hard.